Welcome everybody back into Nerd Sesh. As always, I'm Carson Breber and alongside me is Logan Camden. And today we are joined by a good friend of the show, a very special guest, the one and only Matthew Sponhour. He is going to be coming on with us today to play a little NFL Panic-O-Meter. We're going to look at every 0-2 team and assess just how dire things are, just how freaked out they should be. But before we get into that, Matthew, a pleasure to have you. How are you today, my friend?
I'm doing pretty good outside of the fact that one of the teams we'll be talking about today is my own team. I wish it were the other way around. They were 2-0, and maybe we were talking about y'all's teams. But outside of that, I can't complain. Cincinnati's lovely this time of year.
That's great.
Oktoberfest is coming up. Reds
That's
games
awesome.
are cheap as it stands right now. Doesn't get much better than this.
Life is beautiful. At the end of the day, it's not all about one football team, is it? There's so much more.
No, you got to have a little perspective, and luckily the Panthers make sure all their fans keep that perspective.
You got to have other outlets. Logan, Woj retired today. Is there even anything that you can say at this time?
Woj popped into like a Zoom class I had one time, man. That shit was hype. That shit was hype. Woj is a goat, bro. Shams is like the highest dollar free agent on the market next offseason, bro. He's gonna get the big bucks. I'm excited for the boy.
I know that Woj has always been a big inspiration to you and everyone else in the less than average amount of hair community, so I wanted your thoughts on that.
That's fucked up. That was fucked up. That was a fucked up alley, man. That's a fucked up alley-oop.
That smile faded really quickly.
And I know that O.J. Simpson is one of your favorite figures in life history. I know you look up to him a lot.
I tried to connect with him before he passed. It didn't work out. Let's wipe that smile off your face, Matthew. Although actually you're not smiling, but we're just going around bringing misery. We're going to talk about the Panthers here. And of course, we got to start with the Bryce Young benching because Logan and I actually haven't talked about that on a show yet. 18 games as a starter, and the number one overall pick in 2023 has been benched for the Red Rocket himself, Andy Dalton. What is your take on this entire situation?
We Stay Hot, the podcast that I regularly do, recorded an episode Sunday night after all the games that day, and my main takeaway from the Panthers game is that a Bryce Young benching was imminent in the next few games, if not immediately. To me, it was not a surprise at all. I think this is one of those things where if you look at it on paper, why would you ever bother benching him? Because, he's a young guy. You spent so much to get him. And, even if he's bad, you might as well let him play out the rest of the year. And if that keeps you bad and gives you a high pick, that's a good thing. That logic totally makes sense. The only way that it doesn't is that if he's that bad where the team basically can't even run like a real NFL offense, that is how bad he was. I promise you, however little sense it seems to make, he was bad enough for it to make sense. I completely agree with it, unfortunately. And I'm rooting for Bryce, and I feel bad for him, and we can have a conversation about, how much of this is on him versus how much of this is on the Panthers. But when you go into a game knowing that you can't throw the ball, down the field whatsoever, I mean, almost everything was a check down for him. Almost every time he gets pressured, he can't deal with it. I mean, even though the offensive line did a pretty good job against the Chargers, only 4 total pressures, it still felt like he was running for his life constantly and just wasn't able to look downfield at all. So I personally really agree with it. I think there's other guys on the team who deserve an opportunity to prove themselves. There's a lot of guys on contract years. There's a lot of other young players like Xavier Legette who I want to see have a fair opportunity. And Canales is a guy who doesn't deserve to be shackled to somebody who, can't have the team competitive at the moment. So I'm on board.
Yeah, and the prevailing sentiment for most people, I think, is that the Panthers have failed Bryce, and in a way, I do think that's true. I don't think the infrastructure around Bryce is great, but the Panthers can't win games with Bryce, and he is shackled to Canales. To me, it signals two things. One, I think one component of it is that Dave Canales has to be doing this out of desperation for his job. I think he is scared of David Tepper firing him like he fired Frank Reich. I think Tepper has this weird view of football where just magically the Panthers should be a great football team and a contender. But I also think that this signals that Bryce has likely lost the locker room, right? You're talking about how there's no confidence in anybody that Bryce is going to lead out an NFL caliber offense. there must be just no confidence from everybody inside the locker room too. So I don't really see the upside. I do think that Andy Dalton gives this team the best chance to win football games. I mean, you see even like the Browns last year, right, going from a young QB in DTR or PJ to Joe Flacco. Like, Dalton still has the brain of a QB that's been doing this for a while. He can read NFL defense, he can make simple reads, and he can win you some football games. But I think it's all those components. I think Canales wants to keep this job, knows that Bryce Young is likely leading him down an 0-17 road. And I think Bryce has probably lost the locker room. Obviously, Bryce would look better in different situations. This is not the best situation. It's probably the worst situation in football, man. I think the skill position talent sucks. I think the offensive line is really bad. But that's the one thing that I've had issue with is people coming to Bryce's defense. Like, Bryce has shown us nothing in a little over a year of football now. Like, Bryce just can't play, and that's what I said after last week. I feel bad for the kid, the situation he was plopped into, but Bryce just can't play right now, and so I don't really have that big of an issue with it. It is a stinging blow, and I fear that, he could lose even further confidence, that Bryce may never get another chance, but he's just not an NFL quarterback right now.
It's just a little bit soon for me. I understand everything that you're saying, Matthew, because if you do go 1-16, if you do go 0-17, I mean, that can be your job right there for Dave Canales. It doesn't matter that it's your first year. Like, when you're that historically awful, you could just be gone like that. And also, there are 52 other players on this team who need to feel that they at least can be competitive, who need to be incentivized to run good routes, right? And expect that they can actually get the ball downfield. Like, there are emotional components at play where you just lose faith, you lose morale if you are so uncompetitive. And that's what they are with Bryce right now. My thing is just they are still going to suck with Dalton. They are going to be better because he is clearly a more mature, better NFL quarterback at this moment. And I can also see the perspective of, we want to evaluate exactly how much is Bryce at fault here, right? Like, how functional could we be with a guy who we know is just a run-of-the-mill, respectable, high-end backup, very low-end starter? Yeah, and I can see wanting to gain that perspective, and I get it. The first 2 weeks could not have gone worse in every single way for the Carolina Panthers. I just think this is an unprecedentedly short leash. And I think that part of it is that the situation around him has been so bad, and it improved this year, right? They invested in the line, they invested in the receiving core, but it's still a really rough situation. It's still a weak receiving core. You're not getting a lot of separation. They still can't run the ball. The line is definitely better. I still wouldn't classify it as a good line, but I do think that there is that added pressure, because it's like, you look at Zach Wilson, right, who was an absolute disaster with the Jets every single game that he started, but because they were so good defensively and they were able to be competitive in games and actually win games, it was like there wasn't necessarily as much of a sky is falling organizational, oh my God, everything is crumbling underneath us sort of feeling that leads you directly to say, okay, quarterback, you're done. Because, I mean, he got a way longer leash. I would argue that Zach Wilson was worse than Bryce. I mean, we are comparing two awful quarterbacks, but I thought that was very apparent. He got more run. I tweeted this out. Jamarcus Russell got 25 starts and Bryce has only gotten 18. But clearly, you aren't going to be competitive with Bryce at this moment. The only hope for me would be that things get better as the year goes along, and even then, I think that you have very clearly seen that he's not the guy. This is a very prototypical story of how a highly drafted quarterback fails. You misevaluate the talent. Obviously, with his physical limitations, his size, his lack of arm talent, he should not have gone number one. And at the same time, you put him in a bad situation. So I think that that's very much what we're seeing here. I don't think that Bryce is ever going to succeed, probably, but he's definitely not going to succeed in Carolina. And if he ever does even find a path to being a low-end starter, he's obviously never going to justify being the number one overall pick. It's going to have to be somewhere else. It's going to have to be in a much better situation with a better coach after years of learning the NFL game at a higher level, gaining confidence, because right now it's brutal. As you say, Matt, it's a bunch of checkdowns. When he does look downfield, he just makes a bad read or he completely misses a throw. He's got to be more accurate on the run, especially. He just looks panicked and overwhelmed in the pocket. So I understand. You can look at him after 18 games of football, especially because he's regressed and now he's playing worse in year two in a better offensive situation, and say we've just seen enough. or maybe it's just for now, we're going to yank him and then put him back in later. Although, honestly, I don't think that that's likely because I do think Dalton is just going to be better. And if your rationale is we want the best quarterback on the field, I don't think that that is going to change from Andy Dalton to Bryce Young this year just because Bryce sits on the bench for a few weeks. But it's just tough. I mean, you're throwing in the towel on this guy, and you shouldn't stick with him for longer than necessary just because he was the number 1 overall pick. But there's really no path to being a legitimately competitive football team for Carolina, in my opinion. Maybe you win 3 games instead of 1 with Andy Dalton. And Bryce wasn't the guy. So I get it. It's just a little bit quick for me.
I understand that, but it was just that bad.
Yeah.
They were for sure not going to win a game with Bryce and they're playing like that. And I would argue if we're just saying we don't care about the results of this year, and we only care about, like, could we hypothetically help Bryce develop at this point? Leaving him in there was also not going to do anything for him. It's just so far off of what an NFL quarterback needs to be. And I personally, as a fan, I feel like not going winless matters to me. Yeah. 1 win and 0 wins is a very, very big difference. And seeing what we have now and evaluating the rest of the team with a replacement level quarterback, I think that means something too. If you know you're probably going to have to move on. I do agree that Tepper is very quick to move on from things. He likes to phrase it as, not accepting mediocrity.
Tepper's an idiot.
He's a moron. But, like, part of the poor decision-making from Tepper is, like, his involvement with the quarterback draft pick that was Bryce Young, So when I would look at some of his biggest mistakes, I mean, this is starting to easily line up as one. And I also am not I'm not as upset with him as moving on from Reich after the disaster that it was in year 1. I think coaching continuity is nice to have, and I hear a lot of people say, like, oh, if Bryce had more continuity, things could be better. And certainly it would be good. But if something's not working, I don't think sticking with it for the sake of sticking with it would have been the right move for Carolina. To me, it seems like bad teams have poor coaching continuity because bad results get coaches fired, not the other way around, if you know what I mean. So, I mean, it sucks to see overall the situation play out. I think Carolina will be lucky to get a game or 2. Their defense is still, I think, probably going to end as the worst in the entire NFL because of how they've gutted it. Now with Derek Brown out, I think their rush defense was the worst in the NFL last year, and they lost Luvu and Brown. It's not going to improve.
Yeah.
But they do have a pretty favorable schedule. They play a lot of the weaker teams. Like, they have Vegas coming up, although they just beat the Ravens. The Ravens. They've got the Giants. They've got Washington. They've got Denver. There's some winnable games in there for sure where, they've got a better chance than, maybe against some of the more tough opponents. But it's going to be a battle. They're going to need to get a lot of breaks in a game to get it done.
Yeah, they certainly will. And I just feel for you, Matt, because I think that Carolina has now taken the mantle for the most poorly run organization in all of football. I think David Tepper's an arrogant moron. I think that they have ran this thing into the ground. I do hope they win a game because one of my concerns was just how bad did the Panthers get before maybe we hear rumblings of, like, the Panthers being moved out of Carolina before, there's just a certain money aspect to this where you got to sell tickets, you got to keep fans interested, and the Panthers have just kind of bungled up all of this with, not pulling the trigger on the Brian Burns trade, the Caleb Williams, DJ Moore trade. Like, it is just a comedy of errors here for Carolina, and I pray for your sake, Matt, that they can figure this thing out sooner rather than later, and next season, they bring a new quarterback in, they retool the offensive line, they get more wideouts, they build the defense up. You're looking at probably a 4 to 5 year plan, if you're lucky, where the Panthers become a competitive football team, and I hope that Dave Canales can figure it out, man. But I think Carolina is now officially, now that Dan Snyder's out of the picture in Washington, the Panthers are the most poorly ran football team in the entirety of the NFL.
They made one of the catastrophic front office decisions that we've seen in a long time, with not just drafting Bryce number 1 over Stroud, but also obviously all of the capital that they gave up to do so. And there are still just certain procedural aspects here that I don't understand. Like, I don't want to sit here and be the Bryce Young defender because I think that he is bad in a vacuum, but I absolutely think that all of his issues have been exacerbated by the situation. And there are just certain decisions that I can't make sense of. Why didn't he play in the preseason? Like this dude who desperately needs experience on the field, who is now with a new coach and a new offense and a new look roster, new receivers, and it showed nothing in year one to say, oh yeah, this guy's ready. He can just skip over this important aspect of getting a feel for all these things before the real season starts. Why wasn't he out there? Like, I just think it is a very mutual failing here. I know, Matt, I saw you tweet out about how you can't really have a conversation about Bryce with a lot of people because no matter what, they'll just say Carolina ruined him, Carolina destroyed him. And I don't think that that's an accurate representation of things. I do think, though, that last year, like, unless he was a dude, it was going to be really, really difficult to overcome. And I do think that there is a mental aspect that is just demoralizing when things are that rough. And so even though things have gotten better and Bryce should be getting better with that, I do think that that situation has been exceedingly difficult for him. But he's not the guy. And at the end of the day, that's the only thing that matters, right? We can litigate whether he should have gotten 2 starts or 6 awful starts before getting benched. The reality is we were headed towards the same conclusion, which is if he ever is, again, even going to be an NFL quarterback, it's going to have to be somewhere other than Carolina. And we see these resurgences with dudes, but they're all dudes who have way better physical tools. Baker was never as bad as Bryce to begin with, but Sam Darnold, right? Sam Darnold sucked, and now he's playing very good football through a couple of weeks, but it's taken a long time for him to mature. He was under a brilliant offensive mind in Shanahan. He's under a very good one now, and Kevin O'Connell, he's got really good skill position, and he has an arm, and he has the size, and Bryce just doesn't have those things. So I've been saying for a while, I don't think we're going to see a player like him drafted number 1 again in a long time, just because of the sort of quarterbacks who are dominating the position, and physically Bryce is just so far from that. All right, let's move on, Matt. We'll let you out of your misery. Let's talk about a fan base that's probably a bit more down than they expected. To me, the most surprising team on the list at 0-2 is the Baltimore Ravens. Logan, we'll start with you on this one because I know you were very high on Baltimore. Where are you at on the panic-o-meter? And by the way, I should ask you guys for numbers on the panic-o-meter with Carolina. 1 to 10, how panicked are you for Carolina?
Well, see, this is a good question because I'm not that panicked because we weren't making the playoffs, so it's really no big deal. But I mean, I'd say max it out. They're as bad as they could possibly be.
Agreed.
So yeah, I'd also say 10 out of 10. I'm fully there with Carolina. I just think that, I mean, and somebody asked me this. I think you're looking at, to put a bow on, I mean, you're literally looking at like 2017, 2016 Browns level of disastrous kind of stuff there in Carolina. Baltimore is on the complete inverse of this scale. I have them at a 2-10. The Ravens are going to be fine. Lamar Jackson and a rock-solid defense is going to carry you to a lot of regular season victories. I don't think they're going to reach the sky-high expectations I had for them in the regular season. I believe I projected the Ravens to win 13 games. I think that's probably out of the window, and I think it's going to be really hard to win this division. They have given the Steelers a complete 2-game lead here on them. The Browns are 1-1, right? The sky isn't falling here in Baltimore. I still think they're going to be a playoff team, but you know, they're going to have to play, pretty flawless football. And it just sucks to be so close in both of these games. The Chiefs, right, you're a toe away from sending that game to overtime with Isaiah Likely. Against the Raiders, you just let that one slip through your fingers. You have some defensive breakdowns on the last series, and Lamar can't muster a first down to close the game out towards the end there. The only thing that I'm really worried about with the Ravens is their offensive line, but I think the skill position talent is the best that it ever has been in Baltimore with the emergence of Likely. Now you have Mark Andrews, who I think Andrews has taken a step back, but he's still solid. Zay Flowers is a monster. And they've got Derrick Henry there. So, I think the Ravens are going to be fine. I still really trust this defense. I think Lamar is one of the best offensive engines in football. They may not win the division. I would still be a little bit shocked if they didn't. It's just going to be a little bit harder. They're going to have to make up some ground on Pittsburgh. I would be surprised if the Ravens didn't win the division. Then I'd be really, really surprised if they didn't make the playoffs. I'm at a 2 here with Baltimore. I think they're going to be fine.
Where are you at, Matt?
Yeah, I agree. The two first losses obviously suck, and you start to see all the stats about, like, here's what happens to 0-2 teams typically. But the reason for that is that typically 0-2 teams aren't as good as the Baltimore Ravens. One loss, wins or losses, just one loss, or not one-loss games, but one-possession games go either way in the NFL. They're a fickle thing. Sometimes they break for you. Sometimes they break against you. For the Ravens, not to say that they don't have problems, because I absolutely agree about their offensive line, but it's just not quite been breaking their way. When you're losing by a pinky toe to the reigning Super Bowl champions, sometimes that's how it goes. I think with Lamar, who has such a proven track record of being a winner in the regular season, and the defense that looks still really great, they're going to be perfectly fine. I agree with that assessment. I have them at a 2 as well.
I'll go a little bit higher. I'd be at a 4 out of 10 with the Ravens, and the only reason for that is that my expectations for them were very high. So I absolutely think that they'll still be a playoff team. I think that they should still win this division, but relative to my idea that they would still be the biggest threat to the Chiefs in the AFC. Not quite as strong a team as last year, but still the best contender. I don't feel that way about Baltimore right now. Their defense let them down at the end against Vegas, but I'm not worried about them. Although I don't think it's quite as elite a unit as last year. I definitely think the loss of Patrick Queen has mattered. I still think it's a very good defense, though. There's tons of talent. They're very well coached on that side of the ball. It's really about the offensive line. Lamar's been hurried the most times in football this season. That is how they lost to the Raiders. Second to last series, pressure, collapses the pocket, leads to a deflection, gets them off the field. And in the final series, Lamar takes a sack on first down. That's a drive killer. Third down, he takes a ridiculously deep drop, and they just throw a screen. Like, there's just a tremendous burden on him, and although Lamar is as well equipped as anybody in football to overcome that with just his insane scrambling ability, he's such an incredible one-man offense, it's just crazy hard to sustain. Like, you think about the Chiefs game too, man, all the ridiculous plays that he had to make down to the final series, right? It is just an absurd level of play extension that is required that even for him is more difficult to sustain than the formula that we've seen in all these previous Ravens seasons. So they do nothing but win games in the Lamar Jackson era. And when you pair him with a good defense, as they have always done, and improved skill position talent, the best skill position talent that he's had, of course I think they're going to be a good football team. It's just that offensive line is concerning me. Also, Matt, just to feed you for a second, I do think Justin Tucker is not the same weapon that he's always been. Does that really matter? Not a ton, but like, he used to be a guy you could bank on to kick from range that nobody else in the league could. And now everybody around him is better and he's worse.
That thing started like more as a joke, my whole anti-Justin Tucker narrative, because a couple of my buddies had him like as a top 10 player, as you maybe know. And it's like, okay, he's not that good. But truly, it's turned into...
It's real now.
Really, he kind of is struggling. Kickers have been fantastic this year from 50 yards plus. They've only missed 4 times. 2 of those were Justin Tucker. People talking about him like he's automatic outside of 50 when he's hit like maybe one of his last 10 at this point is insane to me. He's still, probably the GOAT all time or whatever, but no, he's not some automatic once you get to the 50-yard line or anything like a lot of people talk to him about. And we finally started to see that sort of narrative around him. People tweeting out every time he missed, wow, I can't believe it, it's impossible. Start to go away.
Yeah, I mean, he's 1 of 7 from 50-plus from this season and last. So game moves fast, old man. Kickers are ridiculous these days, and he's not one of the best at this stage. But also the schedule for Baltimore. Next 3 weeks, dude.
Yes.
You go at Dallas, you host the Bills, you go to Cincinnati. The 1-4 start is in play there, and their schedule gets easier after, but like, it's no cakewalk. So this is the only reason that I'm at a 4, because when I look at some of the factors that are at play here, when I look at my concerns on the field, when I look at the schedule, like, I just don't think the Ravens are as penciled in as an elite football team as I thought they were before the year. Let's talk about another AFC North team, the Cincinnati Bengals. Logan and I have been lower on the Bengals than most. So, Matt, I'm interested in your thoughts on them. Where are you on the panicometer with Cincinnati?
They're another team that's played in a couple of close ones and just not had things break their way. obviously with the Chiefs game and how that went down, and people saying, Patrick Mahomes got bailed and all that good stuff. I still am pretty worried about them just because of how things have looked. Burrow looked better in game 2. I was really worried about his first performance, but he's seeming to settle in a little bit more. We're seeing him be a little bit more creative. But the receiver struggles and Higgins not being in there yet, and you picked Mims and he's not in there yet. I'm having a hard time finding the upside for this team to go be a contender in the AFC.
Yeah.
And maybe we're talking about the Bengals like they just want to make the playoffs. But the fact that that's where they are with a quarterback going into the season at least, and I think a lot of people still would have as a top 5 guy, is a huge disappointment. I feel pretty strong that the Bengals have played their hand post-Super Bowl pretty poorly. They've let key guys on the defense walk. While they had a good game against the Chiefs on Sunday, it doesn't feel like the same unit, and missing DJ Reader seems to be a pretty big deal for him now, who they let walk for next to nothing. I'd say I'm like a 5 out of 10 on the Bengals. Maybe even I'll even go to 6. I'm worried. I think that they could still be okay because we see teams go through a lot, and if they have an elite guy playing at an elite level at the quarterback position, they can still get it done and be all right. But we got to see a lot of development. We got to see them get back and healthy if they have a path to really going and making a ton of noise in the playoffs.
Yeah, I agree with most of what you said. I'm a little higher, though. I think I'd put the Bengals at an 8 out of 10 right now. The reason being is Baltimore, I just have a different level of faith figuring it out. I think they're going to play their way back into top-tier contender status. I still don't think Baltimore's going to be as good as I thought they were going to be, but I think they're going to play their way back into contention. But there's a lot more talent around Lamar than there is with Cincinnati, and even offensively. Like, I just worry about the Bengals manufacturing offense outside of Burrow in Chase. They can't run the ball. This offensive line is not that good. They're really reliant on that duo of Burrow and Chase. I do like Mike Gesicki. I think he was a really good pickup, but they desperately need T. Higgins to get healthy. The one saving grace for Cincy and why I'm not more freaked out, I do think the pass defense is better. But in a way, like you said, Matt, I think it's offset by how bad that their run defense has regressed. And they have dug themselves quite the hole here. We all know how tough the AFC North is. The Steelers have beat up on 2 bad opponents, got out to 2-0. The Browns have stole one against Jacksonville. They had to win that game against the Patriots. That's just an ugly, bad loss, and you got to hold on against the Chiefs. I just don't have the same level of faith in Burrow. Carson, I know you've been harping on this since the beginning of this season. I don't have the same level of faith in Burrow as this one-man kind of offense in the way I do with Lamar, and I think the Ravens are just better. So I expect the Bengals to somehow figure it out and get close, but I don't think they're a shoe-in for the playoffs. I think there's a very real chance that the Bengals could miss out on the playoff party. And like you said, Matt, this is an arguable top 5 quarterback in football. That is a complete disappointment. You should not miss the playoffs whatsoever. I know the AFC is really tough with all the QB talent. That's a massive, massive letdown of a season. And, I'm not confident in the Browns making the the Bengals making the playoffs right now. So I'm at an 8 out of 10, man. I think things could get really bad really fast. The one saving grace for them is the fact, too, that they have a much easier schedule than their AFC North counterparts, so that could play their way. It could they could pick up some wins against easier opponents, but I don't think they're a shoo-in to make the playoffs right now.
I don't at all. That wasn't my expectation, though. I picked them to miss the playoffs, as did you, Logan. So I would be at a 6.5, maybe a 7 if you're going to make me pick a whole number, an integer, as we say in the business, for the Bengals. I thought that week 2 was definitely improvement, but also they always play their best against the Chiefs, and Lou Anarumo is a great DC. He always gives Mahomes fits. I was encouraged by what we saw from the defense, but I definitely need to see more. I do think the secondary has looked pretty good. I think bringing back Von Bell and adding Geno Stone, they've definitely done a nice job with the safeties. But this run defense was awful last year. They got gashed by New England, who everybody knew was not going to throw the football, and the run defense was not very good against the Chiefs either. It really was the pass defense that stood out in that game. And I kind of think that if this team's going to be legit, it has to be on the back of the defense to some extent, just because I don't think this is a dynamic offense. Like, I believe in Burrow's ability to execute, to make the right decisions, but there's just not enough elite talent on this offense, and he's not the sort of dude who single-handedly carries you like a Lamar, like a Josh, like a Pat, with their ability to create everything. And so when I see that they're 30th in rushing yards, they're 23rd in yards per attempt, their line isn't good, their receiver depth isn't good, like, it's just not an impressive football team to me. And it's not just a situation where I look and I say, okay, they have Joe Burrow, they're going to be fine, they're going to win 10, 11 games no matter what, because I don't think that he is that level of an elevator. So I do need to see this defense really be a strength of this team, and I need to see more up front specifically versus the run to buy in on that. So I am worried about Cincinnati. I'm not maybe panicking because I didn't expect them to be good, but I don't love what I'm seeing. But like Logan said, I mean, their saving grace is their schedule, especially in contrast to Baltimore. 3 of their next 4 are Washington, Carolina, and the Giants. So if you're not 3-3, then we're turning the panicometer all the way up to 10, because like those should be guaranteed wins. And the Patriots, even though I think we expected them to be a bad football team, their defense alone makes them just much more competitive than those teams we're talking about. All right, let's move on to the Broncos, who I think are an interesting spot because expectations weren't high for them, certainly, but it's been a rough couple of weeks. Logan, where are you at with Denver?
I'm at a 7 out of 10 with Denver, and I'm glad you prefaced it with that. I didn't have high expectations to begin with, but this team's just not going to be good. I think the offensive line play has been really poor. I think this is a lackluster wide receiving core. I'm working on a Bo Nix video breakdown from his game against the Steelers. I hope to have that out Thursday or Friday, and that's why I say 7, because I was really, really confident that Bo Nix was going to step in here and be one of the most pro-ready rookie quarterbacks that we've seen, and he has not looked the part. I believe the number is, I think he's 4 of 14 with 4 interceptions on throws, 10 or more air yards. He's just got a lot of things that he needs to improve on. Primarily using and reading the entire field. I notice a lot. Bo will stare down his primary receiver and never look him off. Like, he just doesn't ever look back to the opposite side of the field. It leads to some missed shot plays. It also leads to just bad decisions. I think Bo really struggles technically, like manipulating and moving within the pocket. I don't think his footwork is very good. I think he misses throws because he's not moving within the pocket. Like, he's just a statue sometimes. And then just straight up accuracy. There's a throw where Marvin Mims burns 2 Steelers defensive backs. He overthrows him by 5 yards. There's a really bad one where the Broncos are in the red zone and Courtland Sutton is breaking open on a slant route. It's open. It's a window between 3 Pittsburgh defenders, and Nick sails the ball like 8 yards over his head from a clean pocket. Like, that's why I say I'm 7 out of 10. It really doesn't have anything to do with Denver's team as a whole, because I didn't expect them to be very good. It's more just my concerns that Bo Nix may not be an NFL quarterback, and that's saying a lot. Bo Nix had more starts in college than any quarterback in NCAA history, right. More than Kellen Moore, and more than, there's another guy who went to the league, Colt McCoy. So that's concerning. Like, this is a guy who is a really decorated college prospect. I thought he was going to come to the NFL. It was going to be, and again, I never had superstar expectations, but I thought you were looking at a guy that could be a competent level starter and manage games. And Bo hasn't even been able to do that between 2 games. I'll cut him a little slack, too. Greg Dulcich had some painfully bad drops in this game. Jerome Burton has another bad drop in this game. But I put the bulk of the blame on Bo Nix. These are very 2 winnable games. The first week versus Seattle, Denver's defense comes up with 2 safeties. They're within striking distance all game long. Against the Steelers, the Steelers win by scoring 13 points. I mean, you literally score 2 touchdowns and you win. So it has everything to do with Bo and the fact that he doesn't look NFL ready with all this college experience. So I'm specifically worried about him.
Yeah, that's exactly right. Nix was picked as a sort of guy who can come in and immediately be somebody who can take control of a game. Maybe not as like a creator, but can run things efficiently and effectively, and he hasn't showed that yet. Now, he is a rookie. It is 2 games. Things can get better. But for him to make a lot of mistakes, I think when you're picking somebody who's older, you just don't want to see that that quickly. And things have just been ugly. I agree about the accuracy. I really agree about him moving off of reads. And it makes you wonder, why did he go from Auburn and then to Oregon, and then he looks a lot better at Oregon?
Yeah.
Well, they have an offense that makes it really, really easy. I think that's your number one concern, and you're already seeing it pretty strongly in the first couple of games. Yeah, I think the panic meter for me is probably about a 7. So until we see some better play from Nix, I think being worried about them is totally fair. And I wonder how the narrative around him plays out for the rest of the year if things don't improve, because these first couple of games have been about as ugly as they could possibly be.
Yeah. I'm at a 7 as well, and I think you guys have hit on it. I mean, mission A, far and away for this season, is to figure out if Bo Nix is the guy, and he's failing pretty horribly in that mission right now. And the entire selling point was, right, that you were going to have a pro-ready guy who should have a decent rookie season. He's 24 years old, for God's sakes. And so there's just not upside to tap into in terms of physical tools, in terms of his intellectual growth. I mean, he should be ahead of the trajectory of everybody else who we're talking about in this class, and yet it's just like so many boneheaded decisions. I think back to the Steelers game, like the one moment that they have where he actually throws a nice ball, and then they have a trick play, he throws another nice ball, they get a chunk play. He follows that up immediately with just another stupid interception, and there's almost nothing downfield. As you mentioned, Logan, week 1, it was comical how conservative he was, and he's still turning the ball over. Like, this Denver offense is 29th in yards per play, and they have the most turnovers in football. Bo Nix is averaging 5 yards per attempt, and he's thrown 4 interceptions with no touchdowns. Like, it's really, really, really bad. And the only cause for optimism, I would say, is that we have seen how rough it can be for all rookie quarterbacks this early on. Obviously, Caleb Williams has not looked great, but Caleb has so many more tools. He's younger. Like, obviously, he's just in a different stratosphere in terms of the opportunity for improvement. If Denver had a decent alternative, I would honestly probably bench Bo for a bit. I just don't think Jarrett Stidham or Zach Wilson is that. But that's not good to be benching your 24-year-old rookie quarterback because he doesn't look like he's close to being ready to be a starter.
Yeah, 2 things I want to add really quick. On a broader NFL scale, not to glaze Mahomes or anything, but I think the reason you're seeing more of the struggle, I just think defenses have gotten better at defending quarterbacks in general because they've had to make an adjustment for a guy like Mahomes. Back on the Broncos, I think it's really, really ironic that they moved on to Bo Nix from Russell Wilson because they wanted a guy that could do more, that could throw over the middle of the field, that could make big-time plays, that could dictate games. And I'm not going to defend Russell Wilson and act like he was a good quarterback. Or his stat line's really deceiving because people will look at the end of the year numbers and go, 26 touchdowns, 8 interceptions. Russell's really good. He's not, man. Russ sucks. Russ still sucks. But at least with Russ, he could move the ball down the field a little bit. He could still make simple reads, and he could be effective in the red zone. Bo Nix hasn't really shown. He's had a few plays. Dude, that drive was so nice. That was the best drive of his career so far. The throw to Sutton, he throws with anticipation on that ball, throws it before Sutton's even in his break. It's a really good throw. The trick play, not the best ball, but it's a great play call because you get Minkah Fitzpatrick. The Steelers always put one safety up high in that middle of the field. They either go 1 or 2. Minkah cheats. It's a great play call. And then he just shoots you in the foot with the interception, which is just inexcusable. He never sees the defensive back in the back of the end zone. So I just find it really ironic that they go on from somewhat of a steadying presence who could guide you to 7 wins maybe to Bo, who could have this team bottom out at maybe 3 to 4 wins, which is even worse than I expected for the lowly Broncos.
And I think overall, like, if this Bo Nix pick continues to play out like this, it's just frustrating because it feels like they went quarterback in that draft because they felt like they needed a quarterback. And if you need a quarterback, you have to take one no matter what. And if that's quarterback 5 at 12, okay, then that's what we're doing. Yeah. I thought that the Raiders had an offseason where a lot of people were frustrated that they didn't make a move at QB. But I personally, there wasn't one that was there to me. And now they're sitting here with Brock Bowers, who they got instead 1 pick later, and I'm sure they're happy about it. And in the future, when there's a quarterback that is worthy of a pick, or when they try to go make that move, at least they're going to have a guy there ready to go as infrastructure around them. I think the Broncos are a team that just needed to connect on some hits in the draft, needed to line up a few and knock them down before they were ready to go make a big time move, because this offense really isn't that great around Nix either.
No.
If it's different if it's a generation, franchise guy, you're picking at 1 and you might not have another opportunity to get somebody this level again, then you take the quarterback and you figure it out later. Here, I really wonder if they're looking at some of the guys who were picked right after Nix, in a couple of years and saying we probably should have just waited a little bit if things don't turn around.
Yeah, I think that you're right. It is unprecedented for QB6 to go 12th overall. Like, that doesn't happen, and I get that there was a lack of elite defensive talent like we're used to in this class.
That is QB6. That's right. I forgot. I thought it was 5. Wow.
QB6, man, at 12. And so it's not like they invested a super, super high pick in a quarterback who sucks, but they still invested a high pick in a quarterback who, within the scope of his own class, wasn't regarded that highly. And I do think that we are seeing why that's the case now. When you look like this at 24, man, that is not a good sign at all. Let's talk about the Jags, because this is a disappointing football team. The fact that they're 0-2, they've very much been in both games and sort of squandered both of them. Matt, how worried are you about Jacksonville?
In what terms? Like, in terms of how many wins they'll finish the year with, I think they'll get better. In terms of like what they're building long term, dude, kind of like a 9, man. Mm-hmm. Their offensive line still sucks, and no shocker, like they kept around most of the guys, and they still have the exact same problems as they did last year. It's mind-boggling that they ran this thing back. I think Trevor Lawrence is a great quarterback. I do. But the team around him currently and the offense that they're running with is just like not good enough and should not be this inconsistent. The Brian Thomas Jr. pick looks good. I think that he's going to be good long term. So maybe bump that down a couple of numbers to like an 8, because I'm really liking what we're seeing from him early. Mm-hmm. But I'm just so frustrated that they don't really have a path to protecting Lawrence and to being consistent. Even though Lawrence, I think, is really good dealing with pressure. When you see a bunch of pressure, it just makes things more difficult and causes you to, have more negative plays and more drives when you don't need to. And then when you can't run the ball, especially now when this year running the ball is what you want to be able to do. If you can't do it, it's just going to be tough to not have teams be able to scheme against you no matter how good you are at the quarterback position. So I'm incredibly worried. I think that Peterson is kind of on the hot seat. I mean, if they don't make the playoffs this year, he's probably gone, because there's really no excuse for them to not be this good. And we keep talking about these AFC teams. Oh, the Ravens will probably be fine. Oh, the Bengals will probably be fine. Someone's got to not be fine.
Yeah.
And I think it might be the Jaguars.
I'm fully convinced it's going to be the Jaguars, and I'm cranking the panic meter all the way up. I'm at a 10 with Jacksonville already. I mentioned earlier I thought the Panthers were the worst organization in football. I think the Jaguars are right there with them. And the win total might not reflect it, but when you're just talking about generations of organizational incompetence, right? The Lions were up there for a while. They've gotten that monkey off their back. I still think the Browns are probably up there with some of their boneheaded decisions. The Jags are right there with the Panthers to me. I would fire the whole coaching staff. I'd sell the team. I think Omar Khan should, dude. I just have zero faith in this team winning the AFC South. When you have a quarterback the caliber of Trevor Lawrence, it's just extremely disappointing. The offensive line blows. The wide receiving core stink. They paid Gabe Davis, for Christ's sake. What other evidence do you need? And the thing that compounds all this, the Texans are the real deal. They've got a better leader in C.J. Stroud and DeMeco Ryans. They've got a completely better coaching staff. They have better infrastructure top to bottom. They got a better offensive line, a better defense, and more importantly, they have a better culture. It is extremely dejecting to me watching Trevor Lawrence go to the podium week after week and look so downtrodden. He looks like he has had the confidence beaten out of him. And what Doug Peterson and Trevor Lawrence are saying in the presser does not reinstill any confidence in me. I don't know. I mean, we kind of stink. We should be better right now. No shit, guys. Figure it out. They're not going to. I think this team's going to win 7 games. They might win 8 if they're lucky because they'll beat up on maybe the Titans or the Colts in this weak-ass division. The Jags are not making the playoffs. They are not making any big moves. And I just hate how the narrative is going to sway. I'm with you, Matt. I am still a Trevor Lawrence truther. I would have paid him every dollar of that contract. I think he is phenomenal. He's not been able to showcase it here in Jacksonville. I still think they're holding him back. I think Press Taylor blows. I think Doug Peterson blows. Yeah, I said it last episode, man. I'm ready to light the stick of dynamite and throw it into Jacksonville, man. I'm completely disappointed by Jacksonville.
I'm at a 7.5 with the Jags. I think things are getting pretty dire. They've lost 7 of 8 games since they were 8-3 last year. That is very, very bad. I am a Trevor Lawrence guy, as both of you are. I am a defender of his. However, I do think we have to acknowledge his role in this team underachieving up to this point this year, because he hasn't played as well as he did last year, 2 years ago. I think it's been a very mixed season for T-Law, especially the Browns game, dude. When I rewatched, like, some of the overthrows early were just awful. Like, his accuracy has just been off. He's completing 51% of his passes. And on top of that, his timing with the receivers is off. He almost threw a pick on just a simple little out because the receiver wasn't looking for the ball yet. And then on top of that, yeah, things around him aren't good. I don't think Christian Kirk is a wide receiver 1. I don't think Gabe Davis is a wide receiver 2. I do like Brian Thomas Jr. a lot, but right now he's mostly been good for an explosive play a game and, isn't necessarily as much of a focal point in the offense as these more veteran dudes are, although I think he should be. I think that he's definitely by far the most promising dude in the room. But the line just can't hold up, especially in key spots, dude. In the Browns game, just getting eaten alive in the red zone, on the safety, just no protection. They have procedural issues. Like, this line really sucks. In basically every situation where they needed to convert, they let up a pressure, they let up a sack. So the situation around Trevor is definitely not good. I hate the play calling. I don't like Press Taylor. I don't like Doug Peterson. I want basically everything around him burned to the ground. But on top of that, they've still had opportunities to produce more offensively, right? I mean, the Browns offense did not give you much, man. The Dolphins, they very much held in check. And in the first game, Jacksonville wasn't able to produce offensively late. In the Browns game, they really weren't able to produce offensively at all, but especially early, it was just disastrous. And to me, when you're getting paid $50 million a year, as he now is, and when we want to talk about you as one of the signature quarterbacks in this league, I personally don't have him as a top 10 guy right now, but I've had him knocking on the door of that. Like, at some point, man, you have to be better than this because the situation around you is not good, but you have not been good this year either. And it's only 2 games, and I think he'll turn it around, but I don't want to exculpate him because he definitely has a role in the Jags being 0-2. The defense has been very solid, but this is just the Jacksonville way, man. They lose close games. This is what they've done. They're 8-11 in games decided by 7 or less in the Peterson era, which isn't terrible, but there's a very consistent trend of close games, because most games in the NFL are close, tend to go to good teams. So oftentimes, if you're a good team, you'll be well above 500. The Jags are several games below. I think that's indicative of the fact that the coaching execution hasn't been there when it matters, and that's what I think you definitively have to blow up. I would just be done. I'd be done with this coaching staff, absolutely. And it's really disappointing because you make the playoffs 2 years ago. You're in great position to win the division last year. That collapses. And now this year, they're not a playoff team. I'd be very surprised if they made the playoffs. Still win 8 games, but I'm just not seeing enough.
Yeah. I don't disagree. I had a point to make, but I honestly...
Yeah.
Jaguars next 2 game, Bills, Houston.
0-4, man. 0-4 is very much on the table. They do have a weird trend of beating the Bills, but I don't think it's happening. I don't think it's happening this week. Bills
Gabe
look
Davis
great.
revenge game? Question mark.
Oh man.
Ooh, he's due is the thing too.
He's been due for about 12 weeks, hasn't he? I don't know. He might just be cooked. We'll see. I don't think that this is the spot where the Jags get it done. TD Tutty taking it to the house, in for 6. Whatever you call a touchdown, one thing's for sure, touchdowns matter more at DraftKings Sportsbook, an official sports betting partner of the NFL.
On the ground, in the air, from the special teams or the defense, we don't care how they score them. We want to bet on touchdowns, and DraftKings Sportsbook is the #1 place to bet on touchdowns. Ready to place your first NFL bet? Try betting on something simple, like a player to score a touchdown. Go to the DraftKings Sportsbook app today and make your bet.
Ready to do a touchdown dance of your own? New DraftKings customers bet $5 to get $250 in bonus bets instantly and get 1 month of NFL Plus Premium. Download the DraftKings Sportsbook app and use code NERDS. That's code NERDS for new customers to get $250 in bonus bets when you bet just $5 and get 1 month of NFL Plus Premium. Only on DraftKings. The crown is yours. Let's talk about the Rams, because this is a team that is just in a rough spot health-wise, and they're sitting at 0-2 now. Matt, how panicked are you about LA?
I mean, I think that defensively, they looked pretty solid against the Lions. Or they looked good enough, although, overtime came around and the Lions said, we're actually just going to run at you every single play. What about it, dude? And they said, yep, we'll see you. But against Arizona, obviously a disaster. Now you're without Kupp, you're without Puka. I don't want to say that I'm panicked because that's the wrong word. So I mean, if we think like on their playoff odds, yeah, I'm pretty worried. In terms of where they're going, to me, this team was always going to be scrappy, but probably on the outside looking in. They just lost Aaron Donald. They're in a phase as a team where they're winding down from a Super Bowl win still. It sucks that you have a great quarterback in Matthew Stafford and you're not able to be more competitive than this, but it's the reality of the situation in a lot of places. That being said, I mean, Tampa's a lot better than this. So, or at least they're better right now. So maybe you look at them as a comparison and how they've been able to move on. To me, I think they're probably not going to make any huge moves this year. I don't think that they're going to be. Maybe in the NFC they can find a way to be a playoff team, but I don't think they're going to be a big-time player. No. I really wonder if they're going to be able to do it again with Stafford, but I think mainly you see just too many holes on the defense, too many holes on the offensive line, and if you're not throwing like your big-time stars out there who can go out there and win you any game, which is Kupp, Puka, and Stafford, who they still have, it's really tough to be high on them.
Yeah, I was very, very high on the Rams coming into this year. I picked them to go to the NFC title game, and it was on the back of what? It wasn't going to be on the back of this defense. It was going to be on the back of one of the best offenses in the NFL with Matt Stafford, a solid running game, Cooper Kupp, Puka Nacua. As you mentioned, you lose Aaron Donald, you lose Raheem Morris, you lose Ernest Jones. The defense is going to be putrid. So I think the Rams are cooked. I'm at basically an 8 out of 10 with the Rams. I think they have very little shot at making the playoffs. The injuries are one thing. The defensive regression is one thing. It's compounded by the fact that the NFC West is going to be good this year. Geno Smith and this defense are going to guide the Seahawks to being a really competitive team week in, week out. The Cardinals are probably going to be the surprise team of the NFL season, in my opinion. I think the Cardinals are probably actually good, are going to be creeping in to the playoff picture. So I'm going to propose something to you guys. Matt, I agree with you. I don't think this team is going to make any moves on the football field per se. What about in the front office world? I think the Rams should trade Matt Stafford to the Dolphins for like a first or a second. Kick into the full rebuild. Let Jimmy G hold the ship up. Because I look at the alternative. I think the Rams can be a close to 500 team, likely a 6 or 7 win team at best with a healthy Stafford and a subpar defense, right? You've got Whittington, you've got Demarcus Robinson, you've got Johnson, who's looked good with Stafford, but you're not going to be actually competitive. And so Stafford gets a year older, you get a little healthier, you invest in the draft. This team's not going to be a real contender next year. So I think the Rams should just kick into gear, let the full rebuild happen, let Jimmy G lose you a bunch of games this season, and get some draft capital for next season, because we're hearing that Tua is going to be on IR, which means, the earliest he could come back is maybe week 7 or 8. In my opinion, let Tua get back to full health. Let him, get on IR the rest of the season. Don't risk his life and his health trying to rush back onto the football field. Go get Matt Stafford, man. Be super competitive. Open up the Super Bowl window for Miami. That's where I'm at with LA. I just think you have a business decision to make with this football team. I don't think they're going to be actual Super Bowl contenders this season or next. So go out, get some more draft capital, rebuild for the next couple of years. What do you guys think about that?
Two things. Number one, although I think that would obviously make Miami a better football team, Mike McDaniel loves Tua. They've obviously paid Tua. Tua is going and seeing a neurologist, and he's on the IR right now, but he has made it pretty clear that he intends to play football again. I don't think that they are going out there and trading the sort of draft capital that it takes to get Matt Stafford. I think if they were going to pursue a replacement, it would be much more short-term, who's a high-end backup that we could trade for, or who's the best free agent that we could just sign outright. Secondly, I still think that the Rams probably want to hold on to Stafford. Even though this defense is so far away, this offense very much could be awesome. Like, everything is going wrong right now. The offensive line is decimated. It's been brutal, but they're very injured. They haven't been able to run the ball very well, but I think the line is a huge component in that. And you're down your 2-star receivers. This is just what's so tough about the Rams. Like, this is just 2022 all over again, right? They win a Super Bowl next year, ruined by injuries. Then they're back, 2023. They're a really good football team again. Like, they almost win a playoff game against the Lions, and now we're back here, and again, it is health that's going to kill them. So I'm surprised, Logan. This is a very hard pivot for you, considering how high you were on them preseason. I probably wouldn't trade Stafford because I still think that he's that great, and this offense is so good, and Sean McVay is such a good coach, and maybe you can turn the defense around next year. It's not going to happen this year, but it's not insane. It's not impossible to overturn a defense dramatically in one season, especially, when you consider that it's kind of 2 seasons in the post-Donald era this year and then next. I don't think that I would do that. I don't think that would honestly happen from either side.
I like it from like my personal perspective because I would like to see Stafford on Miami because I agree that would make them a pretty serious contender. I agree that the Rams are probably not thinking that long term as it stands right now. They're a team that's usually still banking to be competitive. I mean, wasn't that long ago they offered 2 firsts and a second for Brian Burns, which
another classic Panthers move, man.
That's the worst move they've made. Everything, by far, that's the one that made
insane.
the least sense. And then to trade him later, just nonsense.
Yeah.
Regardless, I see the vision on it. I think odds that the Rams become a serious contender with Stafford again, not great unless they really start hitting defensively. And even then, you need a lot of injury stuff to go your way, and who knows how much longer Stafford has. I think there's a good chance we look back and say, yeah, you probably should trade him for a 1 and a 2 if you can do it right now. But I'm guessing that they want to try to be competitive because there might not be a quarterback to go for in this draft class, and that probably is part of it. If there was a couple of great guys at the top, like maybe they'll be in 2026, okay, then if we could get out and get right back in with a QB option, might not be a bad play here. There's some guys, but who knows? On top of that, the contracts I think would be difficult. If Tua does not retire, which it seems like he won't.
Right.
How do you manage those? It would have to be the Rams eating a lot of Stafford's contract. And while maybe it's just well, that's fine because we'll be paying a rookie quarterback or whatever. I mean, taking on, I don't know how much dead money it would be, but probably, $70 million or something crazy like that. It's really, really limiting on how you can build out your team for a couple of years. So I wonder if that would just be too difficult for them.
And I do think the Rams' philosophy, as you said, Matt, is they want to be a win-now team at all times. Obviously, we saw, draft capital dished out like never before building up to the Super Bowl, and McVay is just such a good coach that I think that he feels like he can always have you very competitive, especially when you have the quarterback and you have the offensive talent. But all that being said, I'm very worried about the Rams. I'm at an 8 out of 10 on the panic meter, and I wasn't high on them before the year. I had them winning 8 games because I was so worried about the defense, and the defense has been really bad. The run defense is atrocious. They've let up almost 400 yards, 5.5 yards per attempt on the ground. Detroit marched on them in OT. The Cardinals ran it down their throat all game. And now they're injured defensively. Darius Williams is hurt. John Johnson, one of the few bright spots, hurt. Like, it's just going to be one of the worst defenses in football. And then when you have Kupp on the IR, Puka on the IR, Tyler Higbee's still hurt. Your receiver room is Tyler Johnson, Demarcus Robinson, and Tutu Atwell now. And you have Noteboom on IR on the offensive line. Jonah Jackson might head to the IR. They're 31st in rushing yards and yards per attempt. It's just insane. It is going to be the ultimate test of coaching and quarterback play to try to dig them out of this. Just see how far that can take you. And I think it's too much on their shoulders because you have the Niners this week. Then you go at Chicago, and then you have the Packers, and those could be winnable games. And then you're on bye, and I think the prayer is just that you make it to the bye week and you get healthier at that point. And if you're 2-3 at that point, okay, maybe we can salvage this. But with a bad defense, with a bad O-line, with no healthy weapons, like, they're just in a really rough spot. And I mentioned, like, surviving to the bye, but they have the hardest strength of schedule remaining in football. It is ridiculous, the slate that they have in front of them. So I just think it's over. I think it's over for the Rams this year. I really, really don't see this team making the playoffs. I think they're going to be the worst team in the division. I think there's just too many factors at play. Health, the flaws in their defense already, the schedule. I think the Cardinals are good. I think the Seahawks are good. Very, very worried about the Rams for this season. Let's talk about the Colts. Young team, didn't necessarily have the highest expectations. Sitting at 0-2 right now. Logan, we'll start with you. Where are you at with Indianapolis?
I'm in like a 5 out of 10. The reason I say that again, my expectations weren't extremely high for Indianapolis coming into this year. I think I predicted them to be a 6-11 team. A lot of that had to do with Anthony Richardson, and I expected growing pains, inexperienced as a college starter, tools out the ass, obviously, but I expected some bad interceptions, some mistakes like that, and there have been a few through 2 games. Obviously, against Green Bay, it was worse than expected. The one thing that I'm shocked is just how bad the defensive line has been. Torched by Joe Mixon, torched by Josh Jacobs. Matt, you were talking earlier about how teams need to run the football. Like, it's just the bedrock of a consistent football team. If you can run the ball, you'll hold on to it, you'll dominate time of possession. You'll set up the play action, fellas, as they say, right?
Got to set up the play action.
But it has way more to do with just the collateral effects that come with it. Your defense is going to be on the field more. They're going to be dogged. They're going to be tired. Your offense isn't going to have opportunities to score points, which means they need to make the most out of all of their opportunities. You're not going to be able to get teams off the field on 3 and outs. That's where I'm concerned. And so it's partly because of my expectations for this team. I didn't think they were going to be that good, but they've admittedly been worse than I expected. And so I think this is kind of a rebuilding year for Indianapolis. See where you're at with Anthony Richardson. See how much better the defense can get. But, yeah, I'd be a little bit more worried if I had picked Indianapolis to be a good football team this year. I never really saw it, but I have been appalled at how bad the defensive line has been. I'm kind of shocked at how bad they've been.
I agree about the Colts defensive line. It's been a huge disappointment. A buddy of mine, Bladen Kirk from the Stay Hot podcast, was really hype about them.
Name drop.
But Latu was one of my top guys defensively in this draft class, and we haven't seen a ton of production through 2 games. It is 2 games, but it's a little bit concerning considering he's an older guy. He was supposed to be pro ready. He's supposed to be so technically sound. Not somebody who I think is a bad athlete or anything, but wasn't like drafted as some like toolsy project, if you know what I mean. So that's not been awesome so far. I agree Richardson's going to have growing pains. So through 2 games, them having a couple of tough losses, not the biggest deal in the world, but it's not like Richardson's coming out there and instantly having no problems. It's more a how does he grow over the course of the season thing for me than how does he look game 1 and game 2. But as it stands right now, I'd say my panic meter is 4 because I thought that they had a chance to be competitive in this division. And starting 0-2 versus the Texans starting 2-0 and the Texans looking really good makes it difficult for them to come back now.
Yeah, I'm with you, Matt. I'm at a 4 out of 10 here. I thought this was going to be an 8-win team. I thought that they had some pieces in place. And I don't think that that's impossible, but they're definitely not going to contend for the division. They didn't look good last week. The good news is the line is great. They're running the ball very well. But Anthony Richardson had a rough week 2, and That's no surprise. It's going to be a roller coaster year, but couple bad overthrows, couple badly misplaced balls. He hasn't meshed very well with Michael Pittman, which has been interesting. I think part of that might be Pittman is so much about the short routes, the short passing game, which is definitely not AR's strength as a quarterback. But honestly, I don't mind the receiving core around him. Alec Pierce has been productive. I like A.D. Mitchell. I like Josh Downs. Like, I believe in Anthony Richardson. It's just going to be a very up and down season. So my concern is not his inconsistency, although, yeah, he would have to be more consistent if they wanted to win the division. But that's not surprising to me. It is the run defense. Like, they've allowed the most total yards. They're 28th in yards per attempt allowed. Latu hasn't made an impact yet. Buckner's on the IR. Like, I thought the defensive front would be a strength of this team, and they're really struggling right now. So I thought it was a disappointing loss to Green Bay, and they got dogged. They got controlled that entire game. Shout out LaFleur, but you got Malik Willis at quarterback. They game planned around him very well. Green Bay did. But Indianapolis had numerous chances in that game and just did not convert. So I think if you had hopes of them being a playoff team, you would be panicking, because that's definitely not happening this year. But if you thought it would just be, okay, let's figure things out in our first full season with Richardson as a starter, let's just have him progress, and we're good enough that we'll be a competitive, solid football team, then I don't really think that the sky is falling. I do want to see them just run the ball more, though, because they've only attempted 40 runs in 2 games, and they've been very effective when doing so, but that should be the bedrock of this offense more than the passing game for sure. How about the Giants, gentlemen? Matt, where you at?
I'm like at a 2. I thought
Yeah.
they were going to suck.
Yeah.
So this is about right. Honestly, Neighbors has been balling. That's really the main thing that I wanted to see out of them. I was a Neighbors over a Dunze guy personally. I thought that they made the right pick. I think Neighbors has the potential to be a huge, I mean, one of the better receivers in the entire NFL. And so far, he's looked like that. Even in the preseason, he looked like – there hasn't been a second where he hasn't looked like a total game changer. So I'm pretty excited about that. I don't know if anybody was holding out hope for Daniel Jones to be the guy anymore.
Oh, I know a
at least not
guy.
from
I know a guy.
Nobody
Who
here,
would
to
that
be
be?
clear. Drew Drew from Pick a Side. Yeah, and Logan just knows some guy in New York who's a big Danny Dimes guy. No, Drew from Pick a Side came on our show and made an impassioned Danny Dimes defense before the year, which is pretty tough. Pretty tough.
Yeah, so I think as it stands, not much has changed from last year outside of the fact that you've got Neighbors out there and he looks like a beast. And while it certainly maybe seems like everything is bleak, I promise you the road back is through hitting on those high draft picks and getting some core guys to build around. It might not be flashy. It might not be the type of strategy that gets you back competitive in 1 year, but I can promise you when teams who are too far away try to be competitive in 1 year and get it all back in one season instead of like 2 or 3, because it's not, an NBA rebuilding process. It's the NFL. They oftentimes end up just not having the juice to do it. So if I'm New York, I'm excited. I've got a guy, and I feel like I knew what was coming for me, before the season started.
I completely agree. I think that's what the Giants have to do, because when you do try to hit that home run, sometimes you swing and miss and you strike out. You got to hit a couple of singles, man. You got to get some runners on base. I think Neighbors is close to a home run.
I was going to say, you got to give him a triple.
Neighbors is a monster. I think the offensive line is getting better. And I agree with you, man. I don't think you reinvest highly in the QB position. I don't know if that means that I'm a guy that supports Daniel Jones getting out of town as soon as humanly possible. But I don't think you jump the gun there. I think you keep drafting in the trenches defensively and offensively. You build up the infrastructure around them. Daniel Jones' contract comes up, or you want to pull the trigger, you think there's a QB in the draft that you like, or a guy becomes available in free agency, then you do it. I don't think you rush the process here. So I'm at a 1 out of 10. I don't think there's anything to panic about. Oh, my God. Daniel Jones still sucks. I'm shocked. I'm utterly shocked. I think this is a slow process. I think the worst thing that the Giants could do is rush this thing back to strength. Although, again, I've been saying this since day one. I think Drew Lock gives you a better chance to win football games. So I'm excited to see when he gets out there. But I think it's at least encouraging that Daniel Jones has been capable of getting the football to Malik Neighbors. And maybe we look at the Giants in a different light if Graham Gano doesn't screw his hamstring up. Because, I mean, if they just make field goals in that game, you at least go to overtime. Right. And you don't have it stolen from you by the Commanders. So, it's not like I had high expectations for New York. But Neighbors is a monster.
Stud. I think that is absolutely the most important thing, biggest takeaway from this season. Like, just a playmaker, dude. You get him the ball on a screen, you get him the ball on a little drag, you get him the ball on a hitch. Like, he just makes plays, which is exactly what you need around Daniel Jones. You just need a dude who he can get the ball to in the simplest way possible, and he'll make something out of it. And they're feeding him. He's got 25 targets through 2 games. So you got a guy with the 6th pick. That's great. Outside of that, like, the only reason to panic, as you guys have said, is if you thought Danny Dimes could be something, which we have obviously seen enough to determine that he is certainly not. It sucks that you're in this situation with him. But as long as he doesn't get hurt, you can run free of him after the year, be liberated of the Danny Dimes experience. But they're really, really bad. The only reason that I'll have them at a 4 is I wonder if Brian Daboll survives the season. I'm pretty interested in what happens there because I think Daboll's a good coach. I just wonder, if you go 2-15, man, and it's your 3rd year, right, and you're not inheriting that disaster, like, I think that he kind of set himself up to be much more of a scapegoat than he deserves because he somehow dragged the roster in 2022 to the playoffs, and then they regressed last year, and honestly still overachieved considering what they had on the football team. But now this year, I think they're going to be really, really bad. And I would want to give him more time, but I don't know if that's going to happen. That's kind of the one long-term concern that I have with the Giants. Let's talk about the Titans, gentlemen. Logan, where are you at on the panic-o-meter with them?
A 7. And I didn't have super high expectations for the Titans, but they've moved me through 2 weeks. I think this team is good. I think this defense is legit. I think they made moves in the offseason that have made them competitive. I like the corners. I like the defensive line in the front. They've gotten healthier there. I think the Titans are a good football team, and with the Jaguars' incompetence, I think there's a little bit of a window for the Titans to make a playoff push and to maybe push Houston, for the division if they had come away with these 2 games. That's how much I believe in the roster around them. The issue is Will Levis is just a little goofball, man.
Silly guy, yeah.
The cardinal sin that you can make as a quarterback is negative plays, is bone-crushing plays, and he has done. He's had 2 of the worst turnovers I've seen from a quarterback.
He's crushing their bones.
Yeah, he's crushing their balls, man. I mean, come on, dude.
Settle down, Mr. Camden.
I mean, I really think that if the Titans had, average QB play that didn't, shoot you in the foot, I think the Titans could be 2-0 right now. The pick 6 in game 1 versus the Bears, you just can't do that. And then the one where he's falling down, just eat it, man. Just eat the play. Go down. Take the sack. He tries to shuffle the ball on the ground to Tyjae Spears. You just have to learn from those mistakes. And I just think Will Levis is not situationally aware enough to be a quarterback. I think he's got the tools. The arm is live enough. He's mobile enough to make plays. You've seen that on display. I just think the issue is he doesn't have a brain. I don't think he's situationally aware enough to play in the league. And if he can improve on those mistakes, if he can cut those out of his game, I think he is talented enough to be a starter here. But it's been really ugly. Those are just 2 of the worst turnovers I've ever seen from a quarterback, and they directly led. You got to get points in the red zone there. Even if you take a sack, you're going to get 3 points on the board. Against the Bears, you just can't give the game away, which he effectively did to Chicago. It's going to be about cutting those kind of plays out. And if Levis can do that, I think the Titans can be competitive. But I just don't believe in Levis enough. I don't think he's smart enough to play QB.
I'm mostly with you there. Just too many turnovers and too many bad turnovers. I'm only at a 4 out of 10 with the Titans, though, just because I didn't think that they were going to be a very good football team. And I've been impressed by the defense. I think that they've looked good. They've given this offense real opportunities to win football games. And it's just Levis making a couple catastrophic decisions. I've been low on Levis, and I do not think that he is doomed to being a failure because he does have the tools, and if he can do sort of a 180, and like it's not even that every single time he's making crazy decisions, right? He doesn't look overwhelmed like a Bryce Young does or like a Bo Nix does, right? Like it's not that sort of, oh my God, every play, this dude just can't cut it. It's just a few plays a game where you go, what the fuck are you thinking? Like, you cannot possibly do that. So he puts together some good drives and then will just, as you say, Logan, crush your balls. So I don't know. That's to me the real question for Tennessee this season. Is Will Levis a guy? I am unfortunately on the no side there. I don't think that's set in stone. It's a big, big red flag when we're talking about this level of bad decision-making biting you in some big spots. We've gone through all the 0-2 teams, unless you have anything to add about Levis, Matt.
No, I didn't. Not that it matters. I mean, we can keep going, I guess. Whatever.
No, I thought maybe you were excited to say something.
No. It's cool. Let's move on to the next.
No, Matt,
play.
please, let's hear what you have to say.
No, this was exactly my read. I was watching them the other day. You can see why he was drafted at 33. Like, he's got this big arm, and he's aggressive. So many guys come into the league, and then they're just not even willing to try to make the throws. So they don't have the arm to really try to make the throws. No, neither of those two things are true about Levis. But does he have the composure to get it done? I'm not sure. I think he takes too many sacks, and I think too many times during a game he crushes your bones, I'll say.
Yeah. Oh. Well, sort of the family-friendly version. At number 5, I have Cowtails.
Come on.
Am I right, guys? Another one of my classic jokes.
Banger.
Yeah, seriously. Undefeated, that one. All right. So there's one 1-1 team that we're going to talk about today, and that is the Philadelphia Eagles, because they had a pretty panic-worthy loss, some would say, on Monday Night Football. We haven't had the chance to talk about it yet, so we're going to do that right here, right now. Matt, where are you at with Philly on the panic meter?
Well, what a stupid way to lose a game.
Seriously.
Just run
God.
I made a video about it, but I feel strongly about it. I mean, you do all this work to get them down to 0 timeouts, and your reward is that you can run the clock. That's what you get to do now. And there's such a big difference when a team has 0 timeouts and then you chew off like 40% of the time that they had left, which would have been the case if they had just run up the middle. Not only is that true, where they had run them down to a minute, and if Atlanta had had a minute left, they would not have been able to throw inbounds. Even a 20-yard gain inbounds feels like it's not an advantage. I mean, they were down there in the red zone with 40 seconds left. I'm like, man, they shouldn't have this. But on top of that, if you're going to be aggressive and throw the ball, okay, go for it on 4th down then. Go for it on 4th and 3 and try to end the game yourself. Otherwise, if you give them the ball back, let's say you don't get that one too, at least they'll probably be in the mindset of we just need a field goal to take this thing to overtime rather than we're going to drive down and score. Whereas if you go up 6-9, they're like, well, we got to get a touchdown, so we're going guns blazing the whole way down. I just think they totally misplayed that whole thing so terribly. They should be 2-0 right now. It's a disaster.
Can I push back a little bit? Logan, I see you want to jump on the
Oh
wagon.
my God, bro.
I'm going to push back
Go
just
ahead.
a little bit.
Don't defend Sirianni, please, bro.
Here's what I'll say about the game that Sirianni coached. I would have taken the points early when they went for it on 4th and 4 in the first quarter.
100%.
Just because I'm pro aggression. I'm pro going for touchdowns. Where I'm from, we call field goals -4. However, when it's 4th and 4, you know, if it were 4th and 3 or fewer, then I would say go. But at that time, especially considering that points ended up being not few and far between in this game, but, you know, this was not a shootout. Like, I think that they should have probably taken the field goal there. I understand any time that you put the ball in the air, there is the risk of an incompletion. If it were any sort of conventional passing play, right? If this ball was going to a receiver beyond the line of scrimmage, I'd be with you guys. There is no reason for that. That was, I mean, what is the probability that that pass is completed? 93%. Saquon is wide open. He's going to get the first, but it doesn't even matter if he gets the first. All he has to do is make a wide open catch that, frankly, an average child could make.
Well, that doesn't make sense to me. You're trying to get the first down.
And he would have.
Yeah, if he had caught, but you're saying it doesn't matter if he just needed to catch it. No, he needed to catch it and get the first. If it didn't matter if he caught it, just run the ball, you know?
No. Well, I'm saying, Logan, it's no disaster whatsoever if he catches the ball and he doesn't get the first. If he caught that ball, he was going to get the first. But if he catches the ball, which he should do 93% of the time is the number that I'm setting, then it's the same as if you just run the ball and you don't get the first. And then you've at least bled clock, as you guys are saying. I just thought that was an exceptionally bad football play by Saquon. Here's the other thing. Like, Matt, I get what you're saying about how if you have a minute on the clock, you can't even throw the ball in bounds. But Atlanta scored in a minute 5 seconds. So, like, yes, it would have been a little bit different, but their defense was so horrible on that final possession that, like, I don't know, man. They might have gotten marched on and scored on anyways. Yes, it's unlikely, but I just think that with the play call, it's a little bit of results-based thinking, because I think that if that worked, which it absolutely should have, then we would have said, "Oh, what a great play call by Nick and the boys."
I just disagree. I'm at a 9 out of 10 with the Eagles, and I'm at a 10 out of 10 with Sirianni. Well, again, expectations matter. And granted, I am partial to Steelers football. I am running the football in that situation, as I feel like are the majority of coaches. You look at the worst case scenario in that situation to me. You run the ball, you get 3 points, the Falcons get the ball with a minute left. Gives you a very high probability of winning this game. Like, it is just straight up game theory. Make them march 80 yards on you, get the TD. You pass and it's incomplete. Well, we saw what happens. You still get the 3 points, but you leave them almost 2 minutes. It's like what Matt said. There's no point of running them out of timeouts if you're not going to burn that clock. And I understand that Saquon drops that pass, but this is an inexcusable loss to me. The Eagles now, we talk about these teams and their identities. This is the Eagles' identity right now. Losing in boneheaded ways, in losing close games right at the buzzer. They have 4 losses where they have had the lead with under 2 minutes in the fourth quarter since the beginning of last season. And the only reason that this team is not a 10 out of 10 is because I think they're talented enough to withstand and to make the playoffs. But it's all about expectations. They're supposed to be a real deal Super Bowl contender. The other guy that I'm at a 10 out of 10 with is Jalen Hurts. Jalen Hurts can't seem to read a defense anymore. He seems brainless dropping back for passes. And again, he shouldn't have had to try to get them into field goal range at the end of this game. But it's been a continued problem since last season. He's got the most giveaways in the NFL since week 1 of 2023 with 24 turnovers. And
dang,
it's just, this is their reputation at this point. I don't trust Sirianni. I don't trust Jalen Hurts. And I definitely don't trust this secondary or this defense. The Chiefs are known for winning games that they're not supposed to. The Steelers are known for playing 1970s football in 2024. The Eagles are known for utterly collapsing and blowing football games they're supposed to win. Like, I just think Sirianni bungled this one. And when you look at his track record, he's bungled a lot of games up like this. I think it was Carson, I know you're pro-aggression, you're pro-putting the game away. I think it's a dumb decision. It's a risk that the Eagles shouldn't have taken.
But if you're pro putting the game away, then you have to say we should have gone for it on 4th and 3 at least.
I don't know. It's tough because the defense is so abysmal. I mean, I would think that if you are leaving a team no timeouts, a minute and a half, and you put the onus on them to score a touchdown, like, that should not be a situation where you're shaking in your boots. But clearly with the level that the Eagles defense has played at when it matters, that is where they're at. My point is, it's just a warm-up catch, man. Like, that should be a guarantee. That is as close to a run play as you can get while putting the ball in the air.
That's the risk you take when you put it in the air, though. I would have gotten even closer to a run play and actually run the ball off.
I get it, man. I get it. I just thought it was an effective play call that more than 9 times out of 10 would have worked, and Saquon Barkley made a really, really bad football play.
My thing, too, is I agree with you. Saquon could have caught that ball. You see how stacked the box is? The play call I would have gone with, I would have just run a toss out left or out right with a guard pulling, or the other guy that comes open, the tight end is wide open. I would have run a play action and just done a little right over the top. I'm going to the end zone. I don't know,
but
man.
But that's more of a risk. That's more of a risk.
But if you're going to take the
risk,
wide
open in the flat behind the line of scrimmage, he dropped a ball that he should catch every single time.
Yeah, and I don't want to absolve Saquon because he should catch that ball. He's also got 2 defenders that he's going up against. But again, man, we're getting into semantics here.
But he
run the ball,
he's a coward.
Sirianni. Take 40 seconds off the clock. Get them down to a minute. You put the Falcons in a vice, man, and they didn't. Like, it's another bad decision by Sirianni. And when you have these bad decisions stack up, that's when you get the finger pointed at you.
Okay, you're Atlanta.
Yeah.
3rd and 3. And you get to choose what the Eagles do. You would almost certainly pick pass and then take the field goal.
Hold on. Wait, I get to know that they're going to pass the ball?
No, I'm saying
What's
if
the
you
best
if what would Atlanta have wanted to happen there the most outside of like they snap the ball backwards 90 yards and then they don't chase after it. Like you would have wanted them to pass the ball and then you would have wanted them to take the field goal and not try to go for it. The killer part is that they were running on them well, and like even if they got stuffed, it probably gets in tush push range, and even if you don't get the tush push, they probably have like a minute, like a little under a minute, and they're starting at the 3-yard line, and they really can't keep it in bounds, and they're actually just as far away from getting in scoring position to tie the game up. I just think they misplayed it.
I think the tush push aspect is honestly a relevant and fair one to point out. Like the fact that you are the one offense in the NFL that if you are within a yard or a yard and a half, you have a 90% probability to play.
They're so confident in it that 3rd and 1 or whatever. I mean, not even 5 plays ago, it was, oh, you want to give us the first down? No, we want to run this play because we'll be able to run more clock, and we're that confident we can get it in short yardage. To go from, and mind you, Sirianni was hype as hell.
Yeah.
Declining that penalty, if you remember. They were showing him on the sideline going crazy.
Yeah.
To do that and then to end the game like they did, I think they blew it, I do.
Well, they definitely blew it. And I don't like Sirianni. I just thought that was much more of a player error than a
There's
coaching
other
error,
things. Look, there's other things at play there. You needed Saquon to drop that, and you needed the defense to fail. And then honestly, they had enough time to get a good field goal off. Like if Hurts had just cooked up,
that's what I'm saying.
If they had plenty of time. They needed 2 chunk plays, and they were easy for that field goal.
That's my biggest issue. Is it felt like everybody after was like Sirianni, and I'm like the players melted down here, dude.
Here's the thing. I can point to other good stuff that Hurts does. I could point to other good plays that the defense makes, and Saquon overall had a very good game. But a big question in Philadelphia is what exactly does Sirianni do? Mm-hmm. And that level, that decision making right there is probably the one thing you can really point to as his.
He's the CEO. He's the team CEO.
He's the CEO.
That's all he does.
And when he messes up that, it's like, ugh.
Yeah.
It's hard to defend.
I get it. No, I'm not a Sirianni guy. I'm not going to sit here and defend Sirianni. But I do think that, to me, the biggest concern, I mean, Logan, you mentioned Jalen Hurts. I thought he played a pretty good game overall. That's part of what's so brutal. Philadelphia absolutely should have won this football game. I thought they played a very nice, controlled game. They ran the football extremely well. It was very clean. They struggled to stop the run, but they got stops in the red zone. The defense mostly held Atlanta in check, at least in terms of scoring points. But then at the end, even though Hurts throws an interception, and that's concerning to me because, I don't know why he throws that ball in a double coverage. He's about to take a hit as well, so it's inaccurate. That's ball game. You can't do that. And I'm worried about his regression. I just don't know that this was the game where I would look at that. I mean, I'm looking at the defense on the final drive, dude, because I thought it was just disastrous. I thought the pass rush was absent, which remains alarming and remarkable considering the talent that they have up front. Kirk was just sitting in clean pockets with all the time in the world, just standing and delivering. They let up a 40-yard completion to Darnell Mooney. I mean, keep in mind, we're still talking about you just need to keep them out of the end zone with no timeouts in a minute and a half on the clock. And it was very apparent by the time that there was, a minute left. Oh my God, the Falcons are going to score a touchdown here because they just had a breakdown in coverage and they got no pressure on that big chunk play. And then Slade just gets toasted one-on-one by Drake London on the final play. And there's no pressure on a single down of that final drive. There's no reason to lose. So I'm mostly looking at the front seven here because I didn't like the linebacker play in this game. either. And you're facing a great offensive line. I want to give props to Atlanta. Obviously, they are phenomenal there. But to just
Who ate them alive last week, though?
Oh, yeah, I know. Well, congratulations. Yeah. The Steelers are something different.
That's what Pittsburgh does, bro.
That's true. That's a fair point. But really, I think that they have to get more pressure. They have to be better against the run. We talked so much about the Eagles, like insane defensive regression last year. How did they go from being such a talented unit to statistically one of the worst in the league? You want to know where Philadelphia ranks in like every key category defensively? I'm about to tell you. They are 28th in net yards per pass attempt allowed. They are 32nd in yards per rush allowed. They are 29th in points per drive allowed. They are 31st in pressure rate with this defensive front. That's just crazy. Obviously, it's a much smaller sample size. It's 2 weeks, but like, what were the selling points for this year if you were buying in on the Eagles going to the Super Bowl? Because it's a very talented roster. It was going to be, they're going to bounce back defensively in a big way. Jalen Hurts is going to get back closer to that 2022 level. I don't see those things happening right now.
Yeah.
I'm disappointed, dude. I thought the Eagles were, I don't know, a real deal, top-notch Super Bowl contender. And, like, I still think they're talented enough to reach that level, but this defense is not nowhere near good enough. The secondary still blows. They have regressed in getting to the quarterback. Like, they weren't even – their Super Bowl run was like an anomaly. They had 70 sacks in the regular season. That is historic level, greatest pass rush of all time kind of conversations. I don't want to put them there, but, I mean, that kind of production
is insane.
Is unheralded. And – that was the strength of the team. And with Hurts' struggles, the secondary struggles, their struggles to get pass rush, the only thing that this team really does at a high level is run the football. And they're really good up front. That's not good enough to win a Super Bowl, man. That's not going to cut it. The Eagles might be the team I'm most disappointed in through 2 weeks.
Wow. Matt, are you as worried? Like, I mean, Logan said he's at what, a 9? Did you say with Philly?
I'm at a 9.
I'm at like a 5. Honestly, I still think the run game has been really strong for them. I think Jalen Hurts can turn the ball over less. Certainly, the defense has not looked great, but it's not all been bad. Quinion Mitchell's played good ball. Zach Bond had a big game against the Packers. There's some signs of life there, but I also wasn't quite as high on the Eagles. I still had the Cowboys winning this division. So I'm not quite that level.
That's kind of like the perspective I'm coming at it from. If I thought the Eagles were going to win the Super Bowl, then yeah, I'd be at a 9. But I had them as a wild card team, a very talented one. I had them winning 11 games. I don't see why they can't do that, though. I mean, this offense is dynamic, bro. Like, we can sit here and we can talk about Hurts' issues.
AJ was out this game.
AJ's out for this game.
That's very true.
I still think they're going to win a lot of games. It's just when you think about their ceiling, what are the key components to them achieving that? They're not checking those boxes right now. But overall, it's tough. Like, they mostly played a good game against Atlanta, and then they just fucking crushed their own balls, as Logan Camden would say, when it mattered most. So I'm with you, Matt. I'm at like a 5 with Philly. All right, gentlemen. It's been a pleasure. We've panicked. We've laughed. We've loved. We've cried. Any final thoughts before we set you free, Matt?
No.
Beautiful. Well said.
Sorry.
No.
Do more Panthers trivia. Do more Hornets trivia.
Okay, we will. And
I like
bring
those.
You on.
I get hype when I see those, man.
That's good.
Well, actually, I don't because usually you guys like say some nasty comments about the team before you get into it. I believe. Yeah, it's like the Hornets all-time scorer list. Like, this way. You're going to have to really reach into your bag here, man. It's like, okay.
Dude, we are bearers of truth. We're not going to cover up the atrocious histories of the franchises that you love so dearly. I'm sorry.
I mean, if you don't have anything nice to say, you don't have to say something awful.
An honest man through and through, and that comes with the good and that comes with the bad. Logan, any final thoughts from you?
Yeah, I mean, I think Caitlin Clark's going to be like the best WNBA player ever.
Oh, okay. A Caitlin Clark take. Love it. Not on the rundown for today. Save it for another show.
I was just thinking about it,
Okay. All right. Well, thank you for coming on, Matt. It was a delight to have you. Caitlin Clark is incredible, of course. Shout out to the WNBA.
It was a delight to be here, believe it or not.
That's fantastic. I mean, we just always hope. We always hope that it's a pleasant experience for you whenever you drop by, and it's just so good to hear. Everybody go support Matt everywhere. Go follow all of his TikTok accounts. What you got? 6, 7 TikTok accounts these days. You got Sponhour.
I got Sponhour and I got Corporate Sponhour. That's it. That's
Corporate
2,
Sponhour.
by the way.
You got Evil Sponhour. You got No Hat Sponhour. You got on there. There's all sorts of different Sponhours that you can.
You guys don't have a. I know one of you two has a second account, if I'm not mistaken.
I'm sure you'd like to think that, wouldn't you?
No, I believe Carson. I've seen you on some non-nerd sesh
Carson's
TikToks.
burner?
I'm sure you'd like to think that. We do have an account, but we've posted there twice. It has about 30 followers. It's not in any sort of routine use, but we do technically have a second account, sort of a TikTok burner. If you've seen me on another account than Nerd Sesh, it was probably the volume, because I used to do a lot of stuff.
No, it certainly wasn't the volume. It was somebody else. I think it was just somebody
buddy.
you know.
Dig in. Try to find me out.
I'm digging in.
All right. Well, everybody go follow Matt's 7 or 8 TikTok accounts. And go support Stay Hot. What a wonderful show it is. All of our friends over there. Theo, who we had on just a couple weeks ago, he's a bit of an odd duck, but he's a good guy at the end of the day. Bladen, a delight. Go support Stay Hot. Go support Matt everywhere. And please, for God's sake, support us. I mean, come on now. Subscribe to the YouTube channel if you wouldn't mind. We've got great stuff. Logan just said he's got the Bo Nix video coming. Let's go. We've got NBA stuff, NBA season preview starting soon, trivia from throughout the summer, which also starred Matt Sponhour. Huh?
I said unsubscribe to mess with them.
No, don't do that. No, come on. No,
come on.
No,
because
what
if
I want
off the show?
Wouldn't that be?
It's
up to the people now.
Yeah, but what if I want a burger and now I can't afford a burger because we lost a subscriber? Did you ever consider that?
All right, stay subscribed. You know what?
Thank you.
Hell, hit the bell.
Oh!
Yeah.
What a great idea. What a fantastic idea.
What a fantastic idea, guys. Hit the bell, and then every time that you do, a hunchback will sing. So that's just how that works. But yeah, YouTube, podcasts, wherever. Check out our merch, thevolume.com. Join our Discord. Matt's in our Discord as we advertise, and let's just say he's active in there, and he's always having a good time. So join that. The link to that is at the link tree across our social media bios. With that, as always, one last shout out to Matt. I have been Carson Brabber.
I have been Logan Camden.
I've been Matthew Sponhour.
And this was Nerd Sesh.